Hi there, today's lesson will be on the topic of acid and bases. Chemicals such as acids and bases can be found in our daily lives. Lemon juice, stomach acid, battery fluid and vinegar are some common examples of acids, while soap, toothpaste, lime water and dish cleaners are common examples of bases. As such, knowing the physical properties of acids and bases as well as their chemical reactions will be essential for us to understand the world around us. Let us first look at what are acids. Acids are corrosive, taste sour, and have pH values lesser than 7. They turn common pH indicator litmus red. They turn methyl orange red, and phenolphthalein colorless. Strong acids also turn universal indicator red, while weak acids turn universal indicator yellow or orange. Hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, and nitric acid are acids that will be important for you to know. The definition of acid is a substance that produces hydrogen ions, H+ ions, when dissolved in water. So when hydrochloric acid is dissolved in water, it dissociates to form hydrogen ion and chloride ion. Sulfuric acid will dissociate to form hydrogen ion and sulfate ion when dissolved in water, while nitric acid will dissociate to form hydrogen ion and nitrate ion. As we can see, all acids will produce hydrogen ions when dissolved in water. From these three equations, we can also see that hydrochloric acid will always produce compounds containing chlorides, sulfuric acid will always produce compounds containing sulfates, and nitric acid will always produce compounds containing nitrates. So now, let's look at two important reactions of acids. The first reaction is the reaction of acids with metals. At our level, acids react with all metals except copper, silver, and gold. By placing a piece of magnesium ribbon in hydrochloric acid, we will produce a salt and bubbles of hydrogen gas. As said previously, hydrochloric acid will always produce chloride salts. So the salt produced in this reaction is magnesium chloride. You must also know how to write a balanced chemical equation. Do notice that the cation of the salt comes from the metal and the anion from the acid. In another example, iron will react with sulfuric acid to form a salt, iron 2 sulfate, as well as hydrogen gas. All metals except copper, silver, and gold will react with acid to form salt and hydrogen gas. The next reaction is the reaction of acids with metal carbonates. Examples of metal carbonates are sodium carbonate, potassium carbonate, and magnesium carbonate. Add sodium carbonate with hydrochloric acid will produce three products: a salt, water, and carbon dioxide gas. In this case, as hydrochloric acid will produce chloride salts, the salt produced here is sodium chloride. Do notice that the cation of the salt comes from the carbonate and the anion comes from the acid. In another example, when potassium carbonate is added to nitric acid, it will produce a salt, potassium nitrate, water, and carbon dioxide. All acids will react with carbonates to produce a salt, carbon dioxide, and water. Now that we are very familiar with acids, let's look at our bases. Examples of bases are metal oxides like copper 2 oxide, sodium oxide, and magnesium oxide. All metal hydroxides like sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, and calcium hydroxide. Metal hydroxides are very special type of bases. They are soluble in water and have a special name called alkaline. Alkali are special type of bases, so all alkali are bases, but not all bases are alkali. The definition of a base is a substance that reacts with acids to produce salt and water only, with special emphasis on the word only. For alkali, which is a water-soluble base, they are substances that produce hydroxide ions, OH- ions, when dissolved in water. So when we dissolve sodium hydroxide into water, it will dissociate to form sodium ion and hydroxide ion. When we dissolve potassium hydroxide into water, it will dissociate to form potassium ion and hydroxide ion. And when we dissolve calcium hydroxide, it will dissociate to form calcium ion and hydroxide ions. All alkali produces hydroxide ions when dissolved in water. Bases feel slippery or soapy, taste bitter, are corrosive, and have pH values above 7. Bases turn litmus paper blue, turn methyl orange yellow, and phenolphthalein pink. Strong bases turn universal indicator purple or blue, while weaker bases turn universal indicator dark green and blue. There are two important reactions that bases go through. The first one is known as neutralization. Neutralization is the reaction between an acid and a base. The reaction of hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide will give us salt and water. As hydrochloric acid will always form a chloride salt, the salt is sodium chloride. Notice that the cation is from the base, while the anion is from the acid. Similarly, hydrochloric acid will react with magnesium oxide to form magnesium oxide, a salt and water. Sulfuric acid will react with potassium hydroxide to form potassium sulfate and water, while nitric acid will react with copper 2 oxide to form copper 2 nitrate, a salt and water. All acids will react with all bases to form salt and water only. The reaction is called a neutralization reaction because the resulting solution is of a neutral pH, pH 7. The second reaction of bases is the reaction of alkali with ammonium salts. Examples of ammonium salts are ammonium chloride and ammonium sulfate. When ammonium chloride is added to sodium hydroxide, it will form a salt, water, and the pungent gas ammonia. The cation of the salt will again come from the alkali, and the anion of the salt will come from the ammonium salt. So the salt in this reaction will be sodium chloride. In another reaction, ammonium sulfate and potassium hydroxide will form potassium sulfate, a salt, water, and ammonia gas. Common mistakes will be to confuse the chemical reaction, the chemical formula of ammonia gas NH3 and ammonium ion NH4+. All alkali will react with ammonium salts to produce salt, water, and ammonia gas. So, to summarize what we have learned today, acids are substances that produce hydrogen ions, H+ ions, when dissolved in water. It is sour, corrosive, and have pH less than 7. Examples of acids include hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, and nitric acid. Acids can be found in lemon juice, vinegar, stomach acid, and battery fluid. There are two reactions of acids that you must know. The first, acids react with all metals except copper, silver, and gold to form salt and water. The second reaction is that acids react with metal carbonates to form salt, water, and carbon dioxide. Next, bases are substances that react with acids to produce salt and water only. Soluble bases are also known as alkali. Alkali are substances that produce hydroxide ions, OH- ions, when dissolved in water. Bases are corrosive, feel slippery or soapy, taste bitter, and has pH above 7. Examples of hydroxides include sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide and calcium hydroxide. While examples of bases include sodium oxide, copper 2 oxide, and magnesium oxide. Bases can be found in soap, dishwashing fluid, and toothpaste. There are two important reactions that you need to know about bases. The first is the neutralization reaction of acid and base to form salt and water. It is called neutralization because the resulting mixture is of a neutral pH. The second reaction is the reaction of base and ammonium salts to form salt, water, and ammonia gas. That is all for acid and bases. Please complete a summary table for acid and bases as your assignment. Hope you have enjoyed today's lesson. The next lesson will be on different types of oxides. See you there!